you to take your seats. Thank you. There's lots of room up here in front. Don't be shy.
Come on up.
Come on. Feel free if you step away from the bar during our talk, please feel free to get back up and help yourself to another beer, another soda, whatever it is. I want to welcome you all on behalf of the Bench Chamber to our Leadership in Action series. My name is Robin Rogers. I am the Senior Vice President of Programs and Events, and I'm happy to be here with you this evening. There's a few people I want to recognize. If you would just either raise your hand, we have some of our board members here this evening, and I'm really happy to have them recognized. Brian Fratsky in the back. We have Dave Rathbun.
They're off the bar.
Keith Dodge. Tony DeBone is here this evening. Heather Hansen is here down in the front. I want to thank you all for being here this evening. A couple other thank yous. I want to thank Ben Broadband. They're our title sponsor. Our supporting sponsor is Jones and Roth. So we want to thank them. They help us bring some of these events to you. Please silence your cell phones, and then after the evening, you can go ahead and turn them back on. So without further ado, I want to recognize once again our sponsor, Ben Broadband. We have Stephanie here this evening. If you want to come back up, she's going to go ahead and do some of our introductions for us. One more thing. In your little packet, there are some evaluation sheets. If you would please fill those out, we're going to have a drawing at the end of the evening for a growler with a fill. We really do appreciate these evaluations. They really help us bring events to you. And we're actually looking for suggestions for speakers that you would like to hear. So please fill those out, and we have a bowl right over here. You can put those in. So thank you for being here. Stephanie.
Thank you. Well, now more than ever, it takes technology to grow not just a business, but our wider economy. And Ben Bryant takes the responsibility of providing that technology very seriously. Over the last 5 years, we've invested over $100 million in capital to make sure we locally have one of the most amazing IT infrastructures in the country. But I would argue that the most important investment that we make is in the development of leadership. And that's why we're the title sponsor. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how the discussion we start here tonight ripples throughout the business community in the coming days. So in your program, you have Neil Bryant's, I would say, really shortened resume. It's really quite a lot longer than this. And so I just wanted to highlight a few things, which is that in '92, he ran for his first public office and won as our state senator, where he served until 2001. And then you go through his many accomplishments, and the part of his bio that makes me laugh so much is at the end it says, in his spare time, which I can imagine how he has. He enjoys reading, riding, golf, tennis, and skiing, as well as having 2 daughters and 6 grandchildren, which would certainly keep you quite busy. So thank you so much to Troy and Neil for having this discussion, and I'll turn it over to you.
Do we have a second mic? No. Okay, we don't, so that's fine. What I'll do is, after I get done with the introduction, I'll give Neil the mic, and then I'll just talk loud like I usually do. And our children do, because it's important what Neil says, not so much what I said today. So welcome, Neil. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to hand you the mic.
So you can say all the important things. This all got started having these interviews, conversation Rob and I and Tim had a while back. As many of you know, I was born and raised in Bend, and there's lots of great people in this community that have been leaders and were role models of mine as I grew up. And I had never really been able to have a conversation with them about what leadership is, how they became leaders, how they thought about things. We talked about business and skiing and duck hunting and lots of other things, but not things that are important. And so I told them there would be some people I'd really like to talk to, and this might be a good thing to do. And it's been fun so far, and it's going to be fun tonight, and I think we'll all learn a lot. I always learn something and have something to take away from this when we go forward. I will say Neil is the second chamber chair that we've interviewed. We had Dave Rathburn last time, he's current chamber chair. And he tells me you were how old when you were chamber chair?
33.
Last year.
It was a week or two ago. So thank you for your service in the past on that, but going forward. So let's talk a little bit about leadership today. Neil, you know, you've been introduced so many, I've heard you introduced so many times in so many different ways, but it's probably more important when you tell people who you are and what you do and how you do it, how do you describe yourself and introduce yourself?
I usually start by saying I'm an attorney. You lose half your audience. And that I've practiced law, for 41 years here in Bend. And then I've been married for a really long time, and 2 children and 6 grandchildren. So I tend to focus on the family, and then some people know that I served in the Senate, and that is significant. I was senator from '93 to 2001 for Central Oregon, which was a big district, and it wasn't just Deschutes County. It was Jefferson County, the Orange Springs Indian Reservation, Southern Wasco County, and then Northern Platte County. And so I tried to go through those areas at different times, but 80% of the vote was Deschutes County. And so I mentioned the Senate and my service there, and that then usually creates all kinds of conversations. People are curious about what it was like. I try to have people live vicariously through me as that took place, and then the other things that I've done, as I said, the chamber. We started EDCO, I think in 1980. Because we were in a deep recession then, interest rates were 14 and 16%, and we needed to do something, so we started EDCO. We started Bend Inc. Over 50% of downtown Bend was vacant, and the rents were 30 cents a square foot if you could get it, and it was falling apart. So Bend Inc. then turned into the urban renewal district, and I served on that and chaired that for 6 or 7 years. And Bill Healy was on that. And how many of you were here, lucky enough to be here when Bill Healy was around? Probably not many. What a character. He started Mount Bachelor. He is the heart and soul of Mount Bachelor. Got the idea out of the 10th Mountain Division in World War II. And they were trained to be skiers. He was initially from Portland and brought Healy furniture down here. And he was a leader. And his philosophy, at least at the Forest Service, was go ahead and do it and then ask for forgiveness. He created a new run, and he called it night logging. And he was such a charming Irishman. And then if you needed to raise money or do something, he'd do it. So he's dying of ALS, and he's serving on the urban renewal district because he owned property in downtown Bend, and he had a vision and he wanted to see it through. And at that time he couldn't talk anymore, but he had a computer. He could hack out words and it'd show up on the screen. About 1 out of 10 was vulgar. I sat next to him, and I was frequently hitting the delete button, and he just thought that was funny. And then he wanted to tell a story, so he typed out this off-color joke. And these are public meetings. Fortunately, the press usually didn't attend, but then he's coming to the punchline, and he started laughing so hard he couldn't hit the right numbers. Bill Healy was a great leader during that time. But so then after the Senate, I come back and I'm practicing law, and I get a call from the governor saying, I'd like you to serve for higher ed. I said, oh, you want me on the higher ed board? I said, no. He says, I want them to hire you to be their lobbyist. And so I did that for 6 years. And the person who really recruited me was Neil Goldschmidt, who was mayor of Portland, governor of the state, Carter's transportation secretary. Neil Goldschmidt could just suck the air out of a room. But 5 months later, he resigns because of his situation with a 15 and 16-year-old neighbor. And it was just a bizarre time. But anyway, so I did that for 6 years, higher education. And one of the reasons I did it was I wanted to continue the idea of having a 4-year college here. And in 1997, I introduced a bill that said COCC can get 4-year degrees if they do A, B, and C. And COCC thought that was a great idea. I thought it was a great idea. No one else did. But the Chancellor of Higher Education said, if you drop that bill, we'll do a branch campus. And they'd never done one in Oregon before. And so that's how OSU Cascade became a reality in the branch campus. But going forward, it needed to be more. And so that's the dilemma we're in right now. But I've led a wonderful life. I still like practicing law. I like my partners who are here. I like my clients. I take more time off. Try to do 10 to 12 weeks. But I'm on now the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, which replaces the Chancellor's Office and the Higher Ed Board, and it's kind of a referee with the 7 independent boards of our 7 universities, and that's going to be interesting. And we also have community colleges, so for the first time, community colleges and Higher Ed are under the same umbrella. And then we have parts of K through 12 as far as its college class courses in high school. So I don't know how that's going to turn out. We're only going to exist for about a year, but you got to drive down the cost of higher education. You got to educate more people, and we're supposed to figure that out. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Good luck figuring that out.
Yeah.
When you look back at your career and your life, who were your role models and why were they your role models?
Well, I had one sister and my parents. And my parents never went to college. My dad sold farm machinery. And World War II, my mom was a secretary. And I've always had love of food and all those sorts of things, but they weren't interested in leadership or being great leaders. And so you run into people as you grow up, some strong teachers, my football coaches. They're a different type of leadership. I didn't realize that at the time, but that was important. When I came to Bend, I joined the firm of Gray, Fancher, Holmes, and Curley. And Gray and Fancher and Holmes were World War II vets. Gray was a captain in the Marines. He and Brad were classmates at the University of Oregon. And they were just starting law school when the war broke out. And they volunteered. And so he went through basic training, Marine, Officer Academy School, and he ships out for 2 years in the South Pacific. And Brad Fancher Al was from St. Helens, and Brad was from the Dalles. He goes in the Navy. He becomes an incidental lieutenant. He gets shipped out to the North Atlantic. He's on a destroyer, escorting tankers and trying to go through where the Germans had their wolf packs. And they related stories to me from time to time about what that experience was like. I mean, Al talks about shipping out of San Francisco, and they had painted the Golden Gate Bridge black because they were concerned the Japanese were going to come upon them. But he said, I stood there looking as long as I could to see the Golden Gate Bridge until I couldn't see it anymore, because I said I didn't know if I'd ever come back. And he shipped out for 2 years. And he went to New Guinea, and I was an artillery officer. He said I was only involved in one invasion, and he said, I wasn't the troops that went in the first or second wave. I was the artillery later on. He said, but you do one invasion, you never want to do another one. And that's why D-Day, 90% of the soldiers at D-Day had never been in battle before. But, I mean, that's grown up, and he had a responsibility from then. And Brad Fancher told the story of it was finally his time to be in charge of the watch on this destroyer. And, I mean, here's the kid from the Dalles. He's called the 90-day wonder. In 90 days in the Navy, he became an officer. And so it's his turn to be on the watch. He's in charge of this destroyer that has 127 crew members. And it's pitch dark out, and suddenly it dawns on him, he's in charge. And he said it was a sickening feeling. He was bigger. But that's kind of a type of leadership that was foisted upon them. But when they came back and practiced law, it was a top-down management style, because that's what the military had taught. And as a young associate and then a young partner, I saluted, did what they told me to do. Occasionally they listened to me. But there were no leadership courses at that time in any colleges. And when I went to high school and college, that wasn't a curriculum. And now it's offered even in Parks and Rec and COCC, there's classes in leadership. So there's a recognition that we need to train our leaders, and it just shouldn't be through the military involvement. But they were good leaders also. And nationally, I've always been involved in interested in national politics. And growing up, the first president I remembered was Eisenhower, and I liked Ike. And my dad, who was a Roosevelt Democrat, voted for Eisenhower because of World War II. And he didn't like Adlai Stevenson. He didn't want an egghead for president. And remember, Stevenson said, "Eggheads unite." That was one of his campaign slogans. And then when Nixon and Kennedy ran in 1960, I can remember my father saying, "I can't vote for Kennedy. I'm not going to bring the Pope to Washington, D.C." And we're Lutherans. And so that was interesting for me because I followed that. But you get your political flavor usually from your parents at that age. But what really struck me was in the 60s, I was going to college at Pacific Lutheran, and the Vietnam War, I mean, we had 550,000 troops in Vietnam when I was in college. And your college deferment was 4 years. 4 years and 1 day you drafted. And at the end, there were no deferments for being married, fathered, or going to grad school. And I began to believe, I don't see how we're going to win this war. And so I turned against the war. And in 1972, I couldn't vote until I was 21 at that point. Nixon was running against George McGovern. And I went door to door for George McGovern. I was a one-issue candidate. I wanted to end the war in Vietnam. And McGovern said, "I'm going to pull out the troops." So he would have been a terrible president, by the way, but I wanted to McGovern in my first election. I registered Democrat, and so I went through that tradition too. But I think we have an obligation to educate ourselves locally, statewide, and nationally on all these issues, and it's important. And people who complain about politics, you have to remember you get what you deserve in politics. It is a democracy, and it's not a spectator sport.
No, it is not. And I should note that Al Gregg, who you alluded to, was also a chairman of the Chamber of Commerce too, and a wonderful man. And is Al still alive?
Al's 93 years old, and he lives in assisted living, but he's still alive. And when he sees me, he says, "Stand up straight." He's still a Marine.
Well, you've touched on education many times, and what's the role of education been in your life and the importance of it? Where did you go to school? How did you decide to become a lawyer? All those kind of things.
I graduated from McMurray High in Salem, and as I said, neither of my parents went to college, but there was no doubt in their minds that I would go. My sister was a year and a half older, and so she was in college. And so I believed I would attend. I went to Pacific Lutheran. I was telling the story to people here tonight, and they said, "Why'd you go to PLU?" Well, the Lutheran background helped. My dad would pay for a Lutheran education. He was concerned about my soul. And I went to play football. It was a good school, and they had more girls than boys in college, and that was unusual in the 60s. Males out there, Oregon State was terrible. It was like 60-40. My girlfriend was going to Oregon State, and I knew she was going to break my heart. So I went to Pacific Lutheran, and I said I want a liberal arts education. Didn't know what the hell I did, and I want to play football. And so it was a great time, and I met Mary there our freshman year in our class, and we were both going with somebody else at the time. So that's another story. But I thought I was chasing her. She had the shortest skirts on anyone on the campus and the longest legs, and she had targeted me, and I didn't know it. So, but anyway, we ended up starting to date, and we've been married now 44 years. Then I went to Lamb Law School. I went through my Army physical. Do you remember a movie in 1969 called Alice's Restaurant? Yeah. It's an anti-war, anti-draft physical movie. Arlo Guthrie. And that was a big thing. And so I get drafted because I'm graduating from college, and I go to Seattle for this. And they put us on a bus at the YMCA, and there are 52 of us in the bus, one volunteer. All the others are draftees. And we go through this terrible ordeal of the physical and the dental exam and whatnot. And it appears like a pass. For a day, you're in these different rooms, and you're in your white socks and tidy white underwear as you're going through the different rounds of your examination. It's really humiliating. And but anyway, there were anti-war protesters outside. They hand you stuff as you go in, saying, "Here's how you flunk your physical." And some people tried that. One guy ate 12 avocados the night before. He thought he followed his urine system. And what the Army did is we're just going to wait until that passes through. But so I was trying to get in the National Guard. It was full. Couldn't get in the reserves. Finally got into ROTC at Willamette Law School, which was Air Force. And if I was really good, I could be commissioned a captain after 3 years, and then I'd serve 4 years in the Air Force. And at the end of it, I ended up flunking my Air Force physical because I had a bad knee for football. And then they passed it on to the draft people, so I was 4F. No, they didn't make me 4F, they made me 1Y. And I didn't know what 1Y was until one night Woody Allen was on the Johnny Carson show. And Johnny Carson asked Woody Allen, "Well, you have draft card?" He says, "Sure." He says, "I'm 1Y." So suddenly I sit up and pay attention. He says, "Well, what's 1Y?" And he says, "Well, it means if New York's invaded and they need a hostage, I'm the one." But he said the other thing he says to cover gay guys. So
Coming out?
Yeah, I was coming out. So I was 1Y. You had to carry your draft card. You could be stopped, and they could ask you for your draft card if you didn't have it. You're in trouble. So I think I don't know when the draft ended, but I carried it for a long time.
If you had to, now you've been all these years as a lawyer, a politician, and a lobbyist, all kinds of things like that. Is there anything you do over in your education?
I think I would have gone to a law school maybe on the East Coast, just for a different type of experience. I'm happy with Willamette. Willamette was known at the time, so I passed the bar. And I passed the bar to be an attorney in Oregon, and I was tired of being broke, so that was important to me. But I think I would have tried to expand my educational horizon beyond that. I had an opportunity to run for Congress in 1994. Bob Smith, so I'm not going to run again. And so 7 conservatives went into the race, and Bob Smith calls me and says, "You should run. You're a moderate. Some would call you a liberal." He said, "Throw your hat in the ring. These guys will beat themselves up, and you'll win, and then you'll be a great congressman." And I thought about that, and so I called him back and I said, "Okay, Bob, I'll do that, but you got to endorse me." He says, "I'll help you behind the scenes, but I can't endorse anybody in public." Well, what happened was no moderate got in the race, and Les Cooley won. Anyone here remember Les Cooley? Now in federal prison, Les Cooley? And he got about 22% of the primary, and so that was going to be a Republican seat. So I thought seriously about that, but I was still a freshman senator. I knew I was going to chair the Judiciary Committee, and I wanted to see what I could do in Oregon before I tried something big. So then Bob Smith comes back after Les Cooley resigns, and he says, "Well, I'm only going to do this one more term." And so and he announced that he wasn't going to run, and Greg Walden calls me. And Walden and I served in the Senate together. We were great friends, and he said, "Are you going to do this or am I?" And I said, "Well, I still like serving in the state Senate, and you'd be a great congressman." And besides, I said, "I think Bob Smith would endorse you over me." And
Neil, what did you just hold it up higher?
Pardon?
There we go.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, later. So this would be in 96 or 97. Bob Smith holds a press conference in Medford saying, "I'm not going to run for Congress again." And so Greg Walden, who's who's in the Dalles, calls me early in the morning and said, Neil, are you going to do this or am I going to do it? And I was still interested in being a senator of the state of Oregon and wasn't interested in moving from Denver. And I thought Bob Smith would endorse him, which would be huge. And there's no sense the two of us being in the race. And so a great friend, and his voting record is almost identical to mine in the Senate. So I thought he should run, and he's done a great job. Funny thing about Walton, and you should ask him this when he comes through bed, is it true you used to work for Neil Bryant? Because I was the Senate whip. He was my assistant whip. And the whip has to go get the votes. You have to get 16 votes in a 30-person Senate. And so for a brief period of time, I could turn great and say, go check our vote count. Run around and do a circle.
Well, by any measure, I think anybody in the room would say that you've been successful. You've had a successful career. You are a success. In your mind, what's made you successful?
I believe in what I do and what I say. Sometimes I say too much and I think I'm funny and I'm not. I've offended people, not intentionally, but boy does it happen. I won't relate that story right now, but if someone asks me, I will. But it's wonderful to get a phone call from the Oregonian and the Willamette Week on a Tuesday afternoon asking, did you say this? So what was the question again?
Don't like a true lawyer, right? What's made you successful? What's made you a success? Everybody would say you're a success. In your mind, what's made you successful? Are you a success in your mind?
Yes, I think I am. I think people think I'm sincere and I care about the issues of the people, so I think that's important. Most of the time, I think I have an idea what the solution can be. And then why I had success in the Senate and why people would come to me there was I could do the detail work. Someone can have a great idea, but they don't know how to put it into a law and make sure it operates properly. And I could do that. I think part of that was because I was a lawyer. There are very few practicing attorneys in the legislature anymore. And so the Senate Judiciary Committee, we meet for 5 or 6 months, we get 450 bills assigned to us. And we meet every day for at least 2 hours, and sometimes into the evening. And of those 450, a third I never hear. And if a chair of a committee isn't going to hear a bill, it's dead. A third I say we're on life supports, and then a third I had interest in. And those are the ones you worked and you push through. So in my 6 years of running that committee, all but one of the bills we sent to the floor of the Senate passed. And my committee, I had 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, so I was always the swing vote on anything controversial. And on issues like on gun control, I was in favor of registering guns at gun shows. At one time, you'd go to a gun show and buy it, and you wouldn't have to do a check, an instant check. It takes only a couple minutes. And they're selling a lot of guns. But if you're a registered arms dealer, you had to do the gun check, but the other people didn't. I said everyone there at the gun show should do the instant check. And so on the vote out of my Judiciary Committee on that, there was 3 Democrats and me. So generally 80% of the time, the Democrats and Republicans agree, or the dispute is not between parties. But when I did collective bargaining reform for public employees, we got 1 Democratic vote out of the entire legislature, and so that was, just the opposite of what can happen. But I knew how to do it, and then I knew how to get the votes, and then get the governor's signature. So you have to have success if you're going to be a leader. Having great ideas, but then they don't go anywhere, doesn't work very well.
Have you been more lucky or more good?
I've been lucky. I can remember situations where I could see a problem with what I was advancing, and I'm sitting there hoping, saying, I hope they don't answer that question or bring up that point. And most of the time they don't. One of the problems people have is they feel they have to explain everything. If you explain too much, that's a problem. And you learn that being an attorney too. Just answer the question. Don't try and convince the other side necessarily right. I think I've been lucky. And part of that is, having Ben as my home. The law firm always supported me. My clients stayed with me when I go off on these strange 6 months hiatuses. I think most of them thought it was good that I was a senator. And if it was really bad, they could come over and see me. And I practice law on the weekends. I come home and practice law. But that allowed me to have the strength, and at least financially, I wasn't going to qualify for some government food stamp program. And I knew my clients would be there when I got back. So you just work hard, but with a direction.
What's your biggest when your time on this earth is passed and you're laying on your deathbed? We're not trying to knock you off. Your time is coming past. What are you going to rank as your biggest personal achievement?
Well, first it would be the children and the grandchildren. Number one. Then, if I went to politics, it would be the collective bargaining reform. That was in 1995. Oregon hadn't reviewed the collective bargaining statute in 22 years. The unions thought they could kill it, and this is public employees unions. So it's your teachers union, and my wife was a teacher, and we represent the school district. It was the police, the fire, OQ, SEIU, and they control the money for the Democratic Party. So Democrats had come up with me and said, what you're doing here is a good idea, but I can't vote for it because they'll run someone against me in the primary and I won't be here. So pushing that through, and it was a 16-14 vote in the Senate, and it was a 31-29 vote in the House, and then the governor signed it, the Democratic governor. And he hired to represent him in the negotiations Henry Drummond, who's a law professor at the University of Lewis and Clark, and who was the attorney for the labor unions when they formed. So you could have public employee unions. So we met on weekends and the evenings, and we debated and settled on every word that went into that bill. And at one point, OQ and SEIU called a strike to protest it, and we got death threats. Gene Gerfler and I were the sponsors. He's a senator. And so for 3 days, I had a bodyguard signed by the governor. And it was Dick Hart, who used to live over here. He was a state patrolman, big guy. And he's in a suit, which didn't look good on him, and then he had his bulletproof vest on his face, you can imagine. And so for 3 days, he was my shadow. And I looked at him, I said, "Are you going to take a bullet from me? Aren't you a member of a union?" And he laughed, and he said, "I'll take a bullet for you." And so I go say, in the state capitol, I go into a restroom. I said, "Don't follow me in here. You stand right out here. I'm safe in the restroom." So he'd stand there, and he'd have this police face on. And pretty soon, no one was using the restrooms. I was using them. But that was just part of the challenge. And one reason why the governor finally signed it, the unions overstepped themselves. His wife was heading home to Magnolia Hall, and they were picketing there. And the governor's car comes in. It's her and their 6-month-old son, and they decide to harass her a little bit. And they grabbed the car and shook it. And so this is John Kitzhauer's wife, and so she gets into the house and calls him, and she's obviously upset. So he called me. He said, "I'll sign the bill." He said, "On one condition." I said, "What's that?" He says, "I get to tell OQ and SEIU I'm signing the bill and the reason why." And he had it in his office the next day and explained that to him. But it shows you how hardball politics would be. So I'm out of the office, and I don't think much about this. And my father-in-law, who was 94 at the time, has kind of a seizure at my house. We call EMT, and they come and they take care of him, do a great job. And as they're leaving, the two EMT guys, an EMT, look at me and he says, you know Bryant, I said, were you a senator? I said, yeah. I said, and they looked at me and go, Senate Bill 750. That was collective bargaining reform. This is 5 years, probably after that, 10 years after, and these young firemen, they still remember Senate Bill 750.
What's the hard? I mean, when you're a leader, you get credit. Especially, you're a very public leader in the Senate. You've been, I guess, all leadership in one way or another is public. But how do you deal with the naysayers? I mean, you've got death threats. You've got all the negativity that comes to that. How does that not weigh you down and just say, I don't need this shit anymore?
Well, I don't like bullies, and my reaction to a bully is usually the wrong reaction. I want revenge and to get even. It makes me mad. But where it has more of an impact is on your family. After 8 years in the Senate, I was term limited out. Remember, for a brief time we had term limits and you couldn't run again. But my family had it. They didn't want to have politics for a while, and I wasn't quite there yet, but I was getting tired because all I did was being a senator and practice law, and they're both very rewarding. I mean, wonderful stories and opportunities. I served on a couple of national committees and a think tank in New York City called the Vera Institute. I was the only Republican on the advisory committee. I called them, I said, I'm your affirmative action program. I'm from the West. I'm a Republican and I'm a white male. And, they thought that was fun. You just can't get discouraged. And for me, when that happened, it made me more determined to find an answer that the other side didn't like. Because I thought I was right.
How old were your kids when all this was?
We had children young. Amy was born when I was 21, and Mary was 22, and Duff was born when we were 25 and 26. And so I ran when Duff was a senior at Penn High because we wanted to get them through high school. And it was interesting. It turned out to be a good political move because he was the president of the student body. He was the quarterback on the football team, and of course the elections during the football season. So Bryant back to pass. Bryant doing this. The name figure, he probably got me.
It's back to that lucky and good.
Yeah, lucky and good. But we intentionally waited, and going to the question of why I ran. I hadn't run for a public office before, other than the chamber board or those sorts of things. And they did a redistricting after the census, and I thought it was a district a Republican could win. At that time, we had 2 Democratic senators, and they split in down the center. But that changed with the redistricting. And I always wanted to try it. And I realized if I didn't do it, I'd regret it the rest of my life. Even if I lost, I wanted to try it. And so I had a great campaign team. By the way, I had one campaign team, 10 of us. 4 were Democrats. 1 was independent, 5 Republicans. And then I had campaign teams in each of the communities. And so I got great independent support and some Democratic support. And in '96, when I ran again, the Democrats couldn't find someone to run against me, so they were trying to do a write-in campaign. I did a write-in campaign on the Democratic side. I won. So I was both a Republican and a Democratic candidate. So I thought that made a good statement that generally the Democrats liked what I was doing too. So I felt that I had to try this and see what it was like. And it is grueling, but it's more difficult than practicing law. When you're in political leadership. If you're in the minority, it's pretty easy. But when you're in the leadership and got to drive an agenda, it's more difficult. And my worst fights in politics were with the Republicans in the caucuses. Boy, the gloves would come off, and that was the most challenging thing to do.
What's the hardest business decision you've ever had?
Business decision?
Yeah.
It'd be personnel, and the hardest one is when you let someone go, and we're good people, but they're just not working out. I'll lose more sleep over that than almost anything else.
Why would you lose sleep about it?
Because they're human beings and they're nice people, and it's too bad it didn't work, but it didn't work. And usually you make those decisions too late and too slow.
Is there any decision you look back at that you take back? What's the biggest one you asked for to do over?
Mulligan.
Yeah, mulligan. I think I would run for Congress in '94 against the 7 conservatives, and I would have won. And then I would have served on the House Judiciary Committee. And Newt Gingrich was the speaker. I met him once, by the way, and Bob Dole. But also met the 2 Democratic leaders, Tom Daschle and in the House with Dick Gephardt. But I would have then served on the House Judiciary Committee and gone through the Clinton impeachment articles. And that would have been a fascinating experience. And it was also fascinating that Ron Wyden and Gordon Smith were in the trial of Bill Clinton. And so I talked to both of them about that experience. It's an unusual, sad moment in our history why you do it, but I think that would have been fascinating to serve on the Judiciary Committee there.
You mentioned firing people being the hardest business decision. What's your philosophy on hiring and managing people?
In the legal biz, you have to hire people that are not only good attorneys, but have what I call good people skills. Because in a town like Bend, you need to be a rainmaker too. In bigger firms, people can hand you the work. But in Bend, you need to be active in the community, and you need to figure out what you want to do in your law practice, and then you put a strategy together of how you're going to succeed in that. Because with any job, if you're not happy going to work in the morning, you're in the wrong job. And I'm not always happy in some things I have to face, but 90% of the time I look forward to going to the office. So you have to see those qualities in people. I think you have to see people that are curious and passionate and really want to accomplish something. I think that's important too. You try and find people that have had some hard knocks. Bob Loveland, I used to laugh. He's an old football player for the University of Washington and also a former president of the chamber. And we said we should just hire football players because we know everyone has had the crap kicked out of them sometime. You had to get back up and face that same person again. But those types of qualities.
What's your favorite book and why?
I usually break them down into categories, but my favorite person to read about is Abraham Lincoln, and I've probably read 50 books on him. And for a general summary of his life, I go with the Arnold one on Lincoln. But the one that's most fun to read is the one by Doris Kearns, Team of Rivals. And that's, of course, the Lincoln movie was based on that, because she concentrated on the personalities of the cabinet, who all thought they were smarter than Lincoln and should be president. And then he was a master politician. And then there's a book called Lincoln's Greatest Speech, and it's not the Gettysburg Address, it's the second inaugural. And that's a great read, too.
I've heard you speak many times, and if you've never heard him give a speech about Lincoln, it's another thing to listen to. What attracts you to Abraham Lincoln? What do you see in him that draws you to
The unlikelihood that he would have any success in life. What an American dream example. 2 to 4 years of formal education, a father he didn't get along with, a mother he loved who died, and then a stepmom he loved and she dies and lives in poverty, but he likes to read. He's ugly, He's our tallest president, 6'4". He put on that hat, he looks like he's 7 foot. Never had a good hair day in his life. I'm sure Matthew Ray, the first few times he was photographing him, says, let's try this. Come over here. Long legs. They made fun of him when he rode a horse because it looked like his legs were dragging on the ground. And he took that with a sense of humor. His opponents called him the gorilla. And yet he became so articulate. He had a mind that could memorize things. The two books he was most familiar with were the Bible, and he wasn't a strong Christian. He didn't like organized religion, and the works of Shakespeare. I mean, what two books to learn? And he wrote in a prose, poetic way. His timing was exceptional. He was a very good trial attorney in Illinois, and they have transcripts of his trials. I mean, in addition to common people, he represented the railroads and others, and so he knew how to talk to a jury. He loved to tell a story, and could tell it well. And I can empathize with him too, because politics took over his life, over his personal life, and the trouble he had with his generals and with everything else. But he had a direction. He knew slavery had to end, but he knew going into the war, you couldn't fight the war in the first 2 years to end slavery. You had to fight it to preserve the Union. And he didn't bring on the slavery issue until 1863. This shows how smart he was, because then he knew he was going to win militarily. They had Gettysburg and Vicksburg behind him. And so he did the Emancipation Proclamation. That was sitting in his pocket for 6 months. And he then at the Gettysburg Address could introduce slavery and take the Declaration of Independence, not the Constitution, and said, we've got to create equality here. And I mean, tying those things together is just phenomenal for a guy that has that limited education. He served 2 years in the House of Representatives. He was a state senator in Illinois. But everyone generally thought he was going to fail. And he just wouldn't let that happen.
How do you describe your work ethic? Maybe I shouldn't ask a lawyer that.
Yeah, well, we should ask Mark and Heather. I take more time off now, but when I'm in the office, I work. And I usually take something home at night, either to read or to work on. On the weekends, I'll spend a couple hours down at the office. It allows me to put my week, I plan the week and perfect it. But I take 10 to 12 weeks off, and I try to do that seamlessly. Part of it, I take a computer and work some of the time. But I have a strong work ethic. And when I used to do trial work, I haven't done that for 20 years. I thought some of the cases I won, I just worked on it.
Has it been hard to pull back, to take 12 weeks off a year?
According to my wife, yes. If this is the curse of the technology era, if we're on a vacation and I pull out the computer and I just want to check a couple things, it's 2-3 hours and 4 phone calls before I turn it off. And so, yes, that part of it's hard.
When you were at your busiest, how did you balance your personal life and your work life?
Poorly. Again,
You're going to school me here. So.
Frequently, clients work politics have priority over family, and sometimes they understood, sometimes they didn't, but generally they understood.
What do you think is your best quality as a leader?
It's not listening. I'm a better listener now than I was 20 years ago. I think my best quality is I understand and know people well, and I can connect the dots, and I can find solutions. And it might take a while not only to get the other side to know what that solution is, but also my client. And then I'm empathetic. The people that I work with understand I'm trying to help them. And care. So I think that brings it back.
You say you become a better listener. Does that come with age or experience, or?
Both. I was part of American Leadership Forum, and this is a group out of Portland, and it was for 11 months. For 2 days, you go to a training in Portland, and they still exist. It's called ALF, and I was asked to go to that because they thought in 1989 I was an up-and-coming leader, and so they spent a lot of time on the different types of leadership, and we did this Myers-Briggs test, and everyone's probably done that at some time, and it showed that strong leadership tendency doesn't listen well. I think I know what the answer is, and you should agree with me. And in going through that process, especially with a few of the individuals, it became aware to me that process to them was more important than the decision. We could get to this decision in a week, but the process wasn't good. If it took a month to get there, but the process was better, that's what they wanted. I have trouble sometimes with too much process. But it taught me to be a better listener, and maybe I understood their point of view a little more, and I was a little more tolerant.
People that are especially those that are early in their career, or even people that are in the middle of their career, what's the advice you give them to be successful? Be it in law or whatever it is they choose to do.
You have to be happy at home. One, start there. If you can't be happy at home, you're not going to be happy at work. And so make sure that you're taking care of the responsibilities and the necessities in that, and then move on to do things in your community that need to be done. And with work, the same thing. As we said before, if you don't like what you do, you should take a look at trying to find a career change. But if those other things fall in line, you're going to be successful.
As you get toward the latter part of your career, go through, what's the biggest thing you've learned as you start to think about what life is after being a lawyer? Or is there retirement in your life?
I hope so. And because I'll be 66 next month, and there's other things I'd like to do, and I wanted to be a painter when I graduated from high school. I'd still like to be a painter. I've never played a musical instrument. I'd like to dabble with that a little bit. I think I might like to teach. I did some teaching at the college, and I enjoyed that. There's just some other things that I'd like to try, but right now I'm an attorney, and I got clients, and they have needs, and so that's what I do. But one of my things, I still write down New Year's, not resolutions, but guidelines. And then I keep a journal, and then I go back after a year and I review and say, okay, what have I done here? Have I done any of these things? For years it was going to be improve my golf game. That's no longer on my list. Then I kind of rate how I did that year, and then I make a new list. And there's just some things that are going to take more time. I need to figure out some things that are just, I don't have the time to do right now. And maybe I'll never figure them out. That's fine too. I'm kind of an existential Lutheran. So,
You and Garrison Keeler.
yeah.
So when you look at, are you good at change? Do you think you accept change well?
Probably not. If that's where the votes are, that's where you gotta go. But normally, if I think I'm right, I'm going to say, okay, this is where we're going today. What are we going to do when we pick up the pieces in 2 months? So I'm not hoping it fails, but I'm preparing that actually it does. Change is hard. If it's it's change I support, no problem. But right now, I see it's a change that I'm struggling with. I think there's a real questioning about our free enterprises in the U.S. and where it should go and how it should be curtailed, and that is going to take some time to work out. And I think our free enterprise system is, to a large extent, what makes it so different. It's not perfect, but so that's not a change I'm agreeing with.
When you look at the legal profession, how has it changed over your career, either good or bad?
There's a lot of attorneys. There's 14,000 attorneys in Oregon. I think when I was admitted to the bar, there were 7,000 or 8,000. And the last 3 years, only a huge amount of attorneys, like 40%, if not many of the new graduates, find full-time employment in law. But the baby boomers are going to retire. And so there should be some more opportunities there, but the law is changing. People do a lot of it themselves now on the internet, frequently wrong. But they'll go there first and search and try to save money, and then they'll come in to see you, and they're much more attuned to what attorney's fees are and what the cost is going to be, and everything's competitive. You know, I would charge you, $1,000 to do this irrevocable living trust, and et cetera, so I get it for $800 over here. So that's part of it. But technology too makes it more challenging because you get so many emails, and you don't respond to an email immediately, and you get another email that said, "Did you get my earlier one?" And on my answering machine, if you get me on the phone, and people don't call as much anymore because of emails, I say I return my phone calls between 4 and 6. That's so I can work during the day. But you can't do that with email. So, and technology continues to get faster and faster and faster. So what I miss from the old days is the time to think. Because there's just this continual pressure. CPAs feel that same way, right? And occasionally I'll put on a bill, and you shall see when I am my building, I just say thinking. And it's probably the most important time I spend for that client.
So you've seen lots of changes in Central Oregon. You've been here for a long time. How has Central Oregon changed, either good or bad? Maybe a good and a bad way.
73 then had 13,000 people. Each county about 35,000. Sun River had just opened a few years before, as had Black Butte Ranch, only one golf course at each. It was a wood products town to a large extent. We had one high school, Ben High, and but it was growing. It was becoming more of a tourist center. The mill was right downtown, Burke Scanlon, and things were cooking. We had terrible shopping, really, and limited services and things, but we had a good medical community, an old hospital on the hill. You knew everyone. And but it wasn't a very diverse group. And when the timber industry went down, the whole community went down. And tourism wasn't strong enough to hold it up. So I like most of the change. And I think we can plan growth, and it's going to happen. And we're certainly much more diverse now. And we have a lot of people who come here for retirement purposes, but we have a lot of people who want to raise their families. So we have a better school system now, I think, than when we came, and college, and now with COCC Cascades. I mean, if that campus happens, it's going to have a dramatic effect on it. And I think it'll be 90% positive. So I like the change and everything that generally comes with it. I mean, sometimes I complain about the traffic. We used to live in Woodside for years. We moved into Ben on Aubrey because we got tired of the 10-minute commute. We're spoiled.
When you look at the future of Ben, where do you think Ben's going to go?
I think we'll have a new economy, an entrepreneurial ecosystem that is driven by technology. Not manufacturing so much, but just the brains behind the software, and people can live anywhere and they're going to choose to live in Ben. And it's going to be a younger population because because of that. I think that'll be different. Home prices, the land is going to go up again in value, so we're going to have a challenge of where middle-income people can live. They may not be able to afford to buy here, and so you're going to have people in Redmond and Prineville and Manderson Pine just because that's where they can afford. So that creates transportation and other issues. But we should be able to plan and do something that assists that, and expanding the urban growth boundary and allowing for more multifamily residences will assist. I think we'll still be a really strong community. I mean, Bend is a community. You just feel it. And we think we can solve our own problems, and we can. And so that's what's encouraging to me. I've been involved in the last 4 bond campaigns, and they all passed, and relatively easily. The school won $96 million. 62% said yes. The GO bond, transportation, 57% said yes. All raising your property taxes. The Parks and Rec, $29 million, passed by 2%. And totally different campaigns, but and then the college bond failed the first time, passed the second time. So that's a good sign of a healthy community that people are willing to tax themselves to make these infrastructure improvements. So that's important. I think we're going to see a lot more younger families, a lot more older people.
Does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? I got 1 or 2 more, but I want to give you an opportunity. Mr. Fratsky.
Okay, Neil, so a lot of challenges going on right now, a lot of change. We spoke to about it a little bit. Do we have the leadership in place to tackle some pretty long-term objectives? UGB, Westview Cascades, Mirror Pond, sewer infrastructure, schools. Do we have the right people right here in town that can tackle it?
I say yes. Some of them haven't stepped forward yet to say, I'll serve on the school board or I'll serve on the city council. And the city council, you watch closely because on tough issues, it's frequently a 4-3 vote. So that can flip and have huge consequences. You still have a challenge in getting people to run for office too. And so, is the leadership there? I think it probably is, but you got to convince them to do it. The school board right now is pretty solid, and they usually have good discussions and make good decisions and move forward. So, at different times, that wasn't the case. We had a recall of our school board in the 80s, fired the superintendent. It was pretty nasty and ugly here for a while. But schools seem pretty good, but you gotta encourage people to be leaders and train, and the chamber's done a lot of that, and you see leadership courses all over the place, but it's taking that next step.
Anybody else?
Do you have any suggestions on how we can attract more moderate people, not just to local politics, but even nationally? It's polarized now.
Our country's polarized. You can yell at Congress and the president about it, but they're reflecting who elected them. And that's just the way we are, and it's sad. We didn't used to be that polarized, but we are now. And I think that the best thing you could do, one of them is the open primary, because then you elect the best people in the primary. They're not necessarily what party they are. They've done that now in Washington, California. We tried it in Oregon. It was killed primarily by the labor unions. They don't want to see the system change. But the open primary would help. I used to think that we can reunite on crisis and make the right decisions, and I'm less confident that, especially in DC, that can happen. It's for a variety of reasons, it's just not taking place.
Anybody else? Mr. Rapp.
As a more moderate Republican, Neil, what can people that have a business mindset do from a political standpoint to try to move other people from a more liberal standpoint to think that the business perspective is okay? Is it a Republican thing? Or, is it a stigma with being a Republican? Or what can we do as a business community from a political standpoint to try to get business-friendly thinking in our elected officials?
It used to be a Republican thing, but now 31% of the voters in Bend or Shoes County are independents. And the polling I used to see, and I used to get both the Democratic and the Republican polling, because when I was a lobbyist for higher ed, I get both sides of the information. The independents would agree with the Democrats on the social issues, the abortion issue, gay rights, etc., but they have a tendency to agree with Republicans on the fiscal issues. And when I ran the first time, independents could vote for Republicans in the primary. Can't do it anymore. We won't allow the Democrats either. That's stupid. But if that was allowed, you'd get more moderate candidates that way. And for Bend, it's a nonpartisan race for the city council, but asking good questions to candidates about certain things, and it'll show how they feel about business and what they're going to do to support it or not support it. But you got to have a good candidate too, right, Casey?
Here.
Sorry for another question.
That's fine.
You told a great story about how the parks in Bend got its high level of funding, and now we're many years out, and we're the place people come to play. It's made a big difference in our economy. Would you mind sharing that with our group?
Sure. 3 of the campaigns that I was involved in, we wanted low voter turnout. We concentrated on the yes vote. And so that was COCC the second time, the city go bond, and school district, because we could motivate the yes and we didn't want to stimulate the no votes. And that was very successful. With parks, in order for it to pass, it had to be at a presidential race and a huge turnout, because it was people that sometimes didn't vote, and many of them young people, but were motivated by the presidential campaigns, would give parks what they needed to pass. So a totally different campaign. So it passed. Parks has a good tax base. So they do a great job on maintaining the parks, buying parks, running programs, etc. And they're known for that. Unfortunately, people in Portland Valley view Bend as their playground. But with the new one that passed, the trail expansion, the safe water thing in Colorado, and some of the other things that are planning, the ice arena. We've been after an ice arena for 40 years. That's going to be a significant change. The finishing of the Pine Nursery Park with the additional soccer fields, softball fields, and pickleball. Those draw tournaments that fill up our hotel rooms. The challenge is, and I'm beginning to see this more and more, there's a no-growth attitude. People say, I'm not sure I want more people. We've got enough tourists, and I don't think we should expand their growth area, because let's just not have it. When I ran for office, and the most recent polling I see, that's most common upon people who've lived here 5 years or less. So the other one is people with moderate incomes, because they're afraid they can't afford their homes or the taxes. But the no-growth attitude is on the rise, so that will be a challenge. Casey.
You spoke about the old World War II generation, and you knew my grandfather Slim well, and he too went through North Africa and up through Italy and did the whole thing. And I thought a lot about these growth issues in Bend in particular, and I can never remember any of those old boys and my great aunts and people that generation thinking of this as being something to keep from other people. And if you could speak to that change in philosophy, they were just so darn glad to see a good economy that what's the difference?
Well, part of it, anyone that went through the Great Depression is excited about jobs and a great economy. But the other difference is where our migration comes from. Over 50% of it comes from California, and they're leaving something. They don't want to have that environment that they experienced down there here. The old saying, don't Californiate Oregon. There's a bumper sticker in Baker City now that says, how's it go? Don't bend Baker. So that's just a little different attitude than the people that have been here a long time.
All All right, with that, I think we've run out of, do you have one more question and then we'll run out of time?
Well, so speaking of the affordable housing component and the bonds and levies and districts, you can come teach that every year, by the way. The number of people who thought that was a huge hit, thank you. But, you know, are we gonna have a mirror pond and have affordable housing while we pay for our infrastructure and everything? The priority question is out there on the table. And it's coming from even the most liberal with their tax dollars saying, really? You want me to pay for a mirror pond bond and take care of what I know for infrastructure? And I know that you're a smart man. What are your thoughts on that? Butter.
Remember what building you're in before you answer.
Yes. And let me disclaim, I'm the attorney for the Parks District. So there's an ad hoc committee, city and county, and they're negotiating with PPL that doesn't want to generate electricity there and doesn't want the dam there anyway. They want the responsibility for it. And so the committee has said we want to maintain your pond. So how do you go about doing that? And it's tricky. And you have some people that want the dam out and just let it run normally. And you have wetlands along the side, a very narrow channel. I think a majority of Bendites don't want that. I mean, you want to have a mirror pond. You want the silt removed and something that's beautiful, and there's probably a way to do that. But the question is then how do you fund it? And those options are being explored. No one is excited about going back to the voters and say, although for a very small amount you could probably remove the silt on a permanent basis. I had a great slogan for that. It was my nickels worth. If it was a nickel per thousand, you probably have enough money that you could bond to remove the silt. But people east side of town probably would vote for that. It would be a challenging campaign, but it could work. But so the goal right now of the ad hoc committee is to come up with a plan that doesn't involve going to the voters for additional taxes. Affordable housing, that falls with the city council, and you need land for affordable housing. You need money. There's some money there that's already there for the builders to put in, but there needs to be more. Years ago, they needed to create a couple of mobile home parks for people with low income, especially the elderly. No one wants a mobile home park next to them, so you have to almost superside it. But there are things that can be done, but not in our current environment where we don't have enough land. By the way, our vacancy rate is below 1% in Bend, and in Redmond it's 1.5%. Tony, what's the vacancy rate in Lavine these days?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Probably not very much.
All right, with that, we've run out of time. Let's give Neil a round of applause. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and please be safe going home. How are you?
Oh, good. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Busy. This is my wife.
The audience seemed attentive, which is nice too.
Hi, I'm Heather Tenbrook.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I've heard you speak a couple times recently, and it's just a treat.
well, thank you.
Thank you. I enjoy it so much. And I know Mama Bear, so
okay. Yes.
I love her to death. I used to work with her husband a little bit. I manage our real estate office, and always been intrigued with real estate law. And I recently have been landed into more of a real